What if I told you that the worst betrayal of your life could actually save it? Picture this. You're 7 months pregnant, celebrating your anniversary at your favorite restaurant when your husband slides divorce papers across the table. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. The 26-year-old waitress he's leaving you for? She's actually an FBI agent who's been investigating him for stealing over $200 million from retirees and families. This is the true story of Claire Hartwell, whose fairy tale marriage to tech CEO Marcus Hartwell became a federal criminal case that would rock the business world. Because when Marcus thought he was trading his pregnant wife for a younger woman, he was actually falling into the most elaborate FBI sting operation in financial crime history. But the real shocker? The story doesn't end with just fraud and deception. It ends with Claire giving birth during an armed standoff, an undercover agent fighting for her life, and a narcissistic millionaire who was willing to commit murder to protect his secrets. You're about to hear how one woman's personal nightmare became her greatest triumph, and how sometimes the person who destroys your old life is actually clearing the path for your best life. Trust me, you will not see this ending coming. So grab your coffee, find a comfortable spot, and prepare for a story that proves truth really is stranger than fiction. This is CEO divorces pregnant wife for waitress until he discovers she's actually FBI undercover. Let's begin. I want a divorce. Marcus Hartwell's words cut through Romano's restaurant like shattered glass. Claire's fork clattered against her plate, the sound echoing in the sudden silence that engulfed their corner table. Every patron in the upscale Italian restaurant turned to stare at the 7 months pregnant woman whose world had just crumbled. Claire sat frozen, her hand instinctively moving to protect her swollen belly. She was wearing the blue maternity dress Marcus had bought her for their first anniversary, the one he'd said made her eyes sparkle like sapphires. Now those same eyes filled with tears as she stared at the man she'd loved for 3 years. "What did you say?" she whispered, hoping she'd misheard. Marcus avoided her gaze, his fingers drumming impatiently on the white tablecloth. At 42, he was still devastatingly handsome, with silver threading through his dark hair and those piercing gray eyes that had first captivated her at a tech conference 4 years ago. Tonight, those eyes were cold as winter steel. "You heard me, Claire. I want a divorce." The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Claire felt the weight of dozens of stares, the whispered conversations that had stopped mid-sentence. She was a spectacle, a pregnant woman being abandoned in public by her millionaire ex-husband-to-be. "But Marcus, I thought we were celebrating our anniversary," she said, her voice barely audible. "You said you had something important to tell me." Marcus finally looked at her then, and what she saw in his expression made her blood run cold. There was no love there, no regret, no warmth, just impatience and something that looked almost like disgust. "I do have something important to tell you," he said, reaching into his briefcase. "I've already filed the papers." He slid a manila envelope across the table. Claire stared at it as if it were a snake about to strike. With trembling hands, she opened it and saw her name typed in stark black legal font. Claire Elizabeth Hartwell, respondent in the matter of divorce proceedings. "You already filed," she repeated numbly. "When?" "Last week. My attorney said it would expedite the process." "Last week." The words felt foreign in her mouth. "While I was at my doctor's appointment, while I was telling you about the baby's latest ultrasound." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Claire, let's not make this harder than it has to be." "Harder?" She laughed, a sound that came out more like a sob. "You're divorcing your pregnant wife in a public restaurant, and you're worried about making it harder?" Several diners had stopped pretending to eat and were openly staring now. Claire didn't care. Let them look. Let them see what kind of man Marcus Hartwell really was. "There's someone else," Marcus said bluntly. The words hit her like a physical blow. Claire gripped the edge of the table, feeling suddenly dizzy. "Someone else?" "Her name is Annette. She's 26, and she works at the diner near my office. We've been seeing each other for 6 months." 6 months. Claire's mind reeled. That was when she'd started showing, when her body began changing to accommodate their growing daughter. While she'd been glowing with excitement about their first child together, he'd been planning his escape with another woman. 6 months, she whispered. "Since I started showing." Marcus had the decency to look slightly ashamed. It's not what you think, Claire. I didn't plan for this to happen. But Nat, she's young and free and exciting. She doesn't talk about nursery colors and baby names all the time. She doesn't need me to rub her feet or help her out of chairs. Each word was a dagger. Claire felt herself bleeding emotionally, her heart breaking into pieces that scattered across the restaurant floor. I'm carrying your child, she said, her voice stronger now, fueled by anger. Your daughter, Marcus. How can you abandon us for some waitress? Don't call her some waitress, Marcus snapped. Nat is special. She understands me in ways you never did. Claire stood up slowly, her dignity intact despite the tears streaming down her face. The entire restaurant watched as the pregnant woman gathered her purse with shaking hands. I understand you perfectly, Marcus, she said, her voice carrying across the silent dining room. You're a coward who runs away when life gets real. You're abandoning your family because responsibility scares you more than loneliness ever could. She turned to leave, but as she took her first step toward the door, she felt a sudden warm gush between her legs. Looking down in horror, she saw amniotic fluid pooling at her feet. Oh no, she gasped, clutching her belly. No, 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 it's too early. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Chairs scraped against floors as diners stood up. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Claire doubled over as the first contraction hit, a crushing pain that stole her breath. Marcus stood frozen, his face pale. A waiter rushed over with towels while another guest, a woman who identified herself as a nurse, knelt beside Claire. It's okay, honey, the nurse said. How far along are you? 7 months, Claire panted. This is too early. The baby isn't ready. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their professional efficiency a stark contrast to the chaos around them. I'm her husband, Marcus said as they loaded Claire onto a gurney. No, Claire said firmly, looking directly at the lead paramedic. He's not. He's just a friend. The paramedic looked between them, confusion clear in his eyes. Actually, Marcus said, backing away, I need to make some calls. Business emergency. I'll meet you at the hospital. But Claire knew he wouldn't come. As the ambulance doors closed, she saw Marcus walking toward his BMW, his phone already pressed to his ear. She was 7 months pregnant, in possible premature labor, and completely alone. The last thing she saw before the ambulance pulled away was the Maître d' sweeping up the broken pieces of her water glass, erasing any evidence that her marriage had ended there on the floor of Romano's restaurant. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Claire lay on a hospital bed, wearing a blue gown that matched her tear-stained dress, now carefully folded in a plastic bag marked patient belongings. The fetal monitor beeped steadily beside her, each sound a reassurance that her daughter was still fighting. Claire! Oh my God, honey, what happened? Grace Matthews burst through the curtain, her gray hair disheveled and her face etched with worry. At 52, Claire's mother was usually the picture of composed elegance, but tonight she looked every bit the panicked grandmother to be. Mom, Claire sobbed, reaching for her. He left me. Marcus wants a divorce. Grace's face hardened. That bastard, where is he? I'll kill him myself. He's not coming, Claire said, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. He said he had business calls to make. Business calls while his wife is in labor? Grace's voice rose several octaves. What kind of monster prioritizes work over his family? Dr. Amanda Cross pushed through the curtain, her kind face immediately assessing the situation. At 45, she'd been Claire's obstetrician for 6 months and had seen every kind of pregnancy drama imaginable. How are we feeling, Claire? Dr. Cross asked, checking the monitor readings. Scared, Claire admitted. Is the baby okay? It's too early. Dr. Cross smiled reassuringly. The good news is that this appears to be false labor brought on by extreme stress. Your contractions have stopped, and the baby's heartbeat is strong and steady. Grace squeezed Claire's hand. Thank God. However, Dr. Cross continued, her tone becoming more serious, the stress has put both you and the baby at risk. I'm prescribing complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. No exceptions. Bed rest? Claire sat up straighter. But I have things to do. The nursery isn't finished, and I need to find a divorce attorney and… Claire, Dr. Cross's voice was firm. If you don't take this seriously, you could go into actual premature labor. Your daughter needs every day she can get to develop properly. Promise me you'll follow my orders." Claire nodded reluctantly. "I promise." Meanwhile, across town at Mickey's all-night diner, Marcus sat in his usual booth, his expensive suit looking out of place among the cracked vinyl seats and checkered floor. The diner smelled of grease and coffee, a far cry from the upscale restaurants where he usually conducted business. But this wasn't about business. This was about Nat. She appeared at his table with a fresh cup of coffee, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform pristine despite the late hour. At 35, Natalie Brooks had perfected the art of looking younger, her cover identity as 26-year-old Nat Williams so seamless that even seasoned criminals believed it. "Rough night?" she asked, noting his pale complexion and the way his hands shook slightly as he reached for the coffee cup. Marcus nodded grimly. "Claire's in the hospital. False labor, brought on by stress." Natalie felt a stab of guilt, quickly suppressed. She'd been working this undercover assignment for 8 months, and she'd watched Marcus gradually distance himself from his pregnant wife. She knew this day was coming, but seeing the aftermath still made her stomach turn. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, and she genuinely was. "Is she okay?" "She'll be fine. The doctor said it was just stress." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "Nat, I told her about us tonight. I filed for divorce." Natalie's heart skipped a beat. This changed everything. Her FBI handlers had been hoping Marcus would make his move slowly, giving them more time to gather evidence of his securities fraud. But if he was accelerating his timeline— "You did?" she asked, injecting the right amount of excitement into her voice. "Really? Really, I'm done pretending, Nat. I want to be with you. I want to start our life together." Natalie smiled, hating herself for the deception, but knowing that thousands of retirees were depending on this investigation. Marcus's company had stolen over $40 million from pension funds, and he was the key to unraveling the entire scheme. "I can't believe it," she said. "After all these months of sneaking around—" "No more sneaking," Marcus said firmly. "I want you to move into the penthouse. Tonight, if possible." Panic flashed through Natalie's mind, but she kept her expression neutral. Moving in with Marcus would make it nearly impossible to communicate with her FBI handlers, and it would put her in constant danger if he discovered her true identity. "Marcus, that's so sweet, but don't you think we should wait? Your wife just went into labor. People might talk." Marcus's expression darkened. "I don't care what people think. Claire and I are finished. She's getting nothing in the divorce, and I want everyone to know that you're the only woman in my life now." The coldness in his voice sent chills down Natalie's spine. This was a man who could abandon his pregnant wife without a second thought. What would he do if he discovered she was an FBI agent? Across town, in a small apartment above a florist shop, Natalie's real life waited. The walls were covered with surveillance photos and financial documents, evidence of Marcus's crimes carefully organized on a bulletin board that she covered with a sheet whenever she had visitors. Her secure phone buzzed with a text from Detective Ray Sullivan, her FBI handler. "Status report, ASAP." Natalie glanced around the diner, making sure no one was watching, then quickly typed back, "He filed for divorce tonight. Wife in hospital. Wants me to move in immediately. Situation escalating." The response came within seconds. "Negative on moving in. Too dangerous. Need more evidence before we move. How much time do we have?" Natalie looked back at Marcus, who was staring out the window with the expression of a man planning his next move. She had a sinking feeling that time was running out faster than any of them had anticipated. "Unknown," she typed. "He's getting desperate. We'll maintain cover as long as possible." Back at the hospital, Claire was finally able to rest. The contractions had stopped completely, and the baby's movements had returned to normal. Grace had gone home to pack a bag and make arrangements to stay with Claire during her bed rest. But as Claire lay in the quiet darkness of the hospital room, she couldn't shake the feeling that her nightmare was just beginning. Marcus had looked at her tonight with such cold calculation, as if she were nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. For the first time in her marriage, Claire wondered if she truly knew her husband at all. Dr. Cross returned with discharge papers and a stern warning. "Remember, complete bed rest. No stress, no heavy lifting, no emotional upheavals if you can help it. I'll do my best, Claire said, though she knew that divorcing Marcus would involve plenty of emotional upheaval. Is there someone who can stay with you? You shouldn't be alone right now. My mother is coming to stay with me. Good. And Claire? Dr. Cross paused at the door. Whatever is going on in your personal life, don't let it put your daughter at risk. She needs you to be strong. Claire nodded, her hand moving protectively to her belly. Her daughter would be born into a broken home, but she would be loved. Claire would make sure of that, even if it meant fighting Marcus for every penny of child support. As the nurse wheeled her out to Grace's waiting car, Claire made a silent promise to her unborn daughter. I won't let him hurt us anymore, baby girl. Mommy's going to fight for both of us. She had no idea that across town, an FBI agent posing as a waitress was fighting the same battle from the inside, gathering evidence that would eventually bring Marcus's world crashing down around him. But first, both women would have to survive what was coming next. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hartwell Technologies, casting long shadows across Marcus's corner office. Vincent Morrison sat across from his business partner's mahogany desk, his face a mask of controlled anger. You did what? Vincent asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Marcus didn't look up from his computer screen, where stock prices flickered in real time. I filed for divorce. It's not that complicated, Vincent. Your wife is 7 months pregnant, Marcus. 7 months pregnant, and you're divorcing her for some waitress? Her name is Nat, Marcus snapped, finally meeting Vincent's eyes. And she's not some waitress. She's the woman I love. Vincent Morrison had known Claire since their college days at Stanford, back when she was Claire Patterson, the brilliant marketing student who could sell ice to Eskimos and charm the pants off any client. He'd introduced her to Marcus at a tech conference 3 years ago, thinking they'd make a good match. Now he was beginning to think he'd made the worst mistake of his life. Claire gave up her career for you, Vincent said. She was on the fast track to partner at Henderson and Associates. Do you remember that? She had offers from 3 major firms, and she turned them all down because she believed in your partnership. That was her choice, Marcus said coldly. Her choice based on promises you made. Promises about building a life together, about being a family. Marcus slammed his laptop shut. Don't lecture me about family, Vincent. You've been divorced twice. What makes you an expert on marriage? At least I never abandoned a pregnant wife in a public restaurant. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Vincent saw something dangerous flicker in his partner's eyes. How do you know about the restaurant? Marcus asked slowly. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a video that was already going viral on social media. Someone had recorded Claire's water breaking, the chaos that followed, and Marcus's hasty exit. The caption read, CEO abandons pregnant wife for younger woman. Karma incoming. It's everywhere, Marcus. Business Week picked it up an hour ago. Our stock is down 12%. Marcus stared at the screen in horror. In the video, he looked exactly like what he was, a wealthy, privileged man abandoning his family without a second thought. The comments were brutal. This will blow over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Will it? Because I've been getting calls all morning from investors asking about the company's stability. When the CEO's personal life is this messy, people start wondering what else might be falling apart. Marcus turned back to his computer, pulling up financial spreadsheets that showed the real scope of his problems. The Ponzi scheme he'd been running for 3 years was finally catching up with him. New investors were becoming harder to find, and existing clients were asking uncomfortable questions about their returns. We need to move money offshore, Marcus said quietly. All of it. The Cayman accounts are ready. Amari, Vincent's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I've been preparing for this day, Vincent. If the SEC starts investigating, we need to have our assets protected. Our assets? Marcus, what have you done? Marcus turned to face his partner, and Vincent saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about a messy divorce or a midlife crisis. This was about survival. The company is bankrupt, Vincent. We've been paying early investors with money from new investors for 3 years. It's a house of cards, and it's about to collapse. Vincent felt the room spin around him. You've been running a Ponzi scheme? With our clients' money? Not our clients. Pension funds, retirement accounts. People who won't miss the money for years. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Do you realize what you've done? We're talking about thousands of families, people who trusted us with their life savings. Marcus shrugged as if they were discussing the weather. Business is business, Vincent. You win some, you lose some. This isn't business. This is theft. This is fraud on a massive scale. Keep your voice down, Marcus hissed, glancing toward the door. The walls have ears in this building. Vincent stood up slowly, his hands shaking with rage. I won't be part of this, Marcus. I'm going to the authorities. No, you're not. Something in Marcus's tone made Vincent freeze. His partner was staring at him with an expression he'd never seen before, cold and calculating and utterly ruthless. Vincent, you've been my partner for 5 years. Your signature is on half the documents. Your name is on the accounts. If I go down, you go down with me. I had no idea what you were doing. Try proving that to a federal prosecutor. Vincent sank back into his chair, the full weight of his situation crashing over him. Marcus was right. Even if he'd been an unwitting accomplice, his involvement in the company made him legally vulnerable. There's another way, Marcus continued. We transfer everything to the offshore accounts, take what we can, and disappear. I've got new identities ready, new passports. We can be in a non-extradition country by tomorrow night. And leave Claire to face the music alone? Leave her to deal with the FBI and the bankruptcy proceedings while she's pregnant? Claire will be fine. She's tougher than she looks. Vincent stared at his partner in amazement. Who are you? What happened to the man I started this company with? I grew up, Marcus said simply. I realized that loyalty is a luxury I can't afford. Meanwhile, across town, FBI Special Agent Natalie Brooks sat in the back booth of Mickey's Diner, her laptop hidden behind a stack of romance novels. To any casual observer, she looked like a waitress on her break, catching up on her reading. In reality, she was encrypting files and uploading surveillance footage to a secure FBI server. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Detective Sullivan. Meeting requested, 1 hour. Usual place. Natalie glanced around the diner, making sure no one was watching, then typed back, confirmed. Situation deteriorating rapidly. The usual place was a defunct dry cleaner 3 blocks away, the perfect cover for a quick briefing. Natalie had been using the location for months, slipping in through the back entrance during her supposed lunch breaks. Detective Ray Sullivan was waiting for her when she arrived, his weathered face etched with concern. At 48, Sullivan had spent 20 years with the FBI, working everything from organized crime to white-collar fraud. But the Marcus Hartwell case was proving to be more complex than anyone had anticipated. Talk to me, Sullivan said without preamble. He's accelerating his timeline, Natalie said. Filed for divorce last night, wants me to move in immediately. Something has him spooked. Now, we know what's got him spooked. His business partner is asking questions. Sullivan handed her a surveillance photo taken through the windows of Hartwell Technologies. It showed Marcus and Vincent in what appeared to be a heated argument. Vincent Morrison, former military, squeaky clean record. We think he's just figured out what Marcus has been doing. That makes him dangerous to Marcus, Natalie said. What's our contingency if Marcus decides to eliminate potential witnesses? We've got surveillance on Morrison, but it's limited. If Marcus moves against him, we might not be able to intervene in time. Natalie studied the photograph, noting the tension in both men's postures. What about Claire? If Marcus is willing to hurt his business partner, we've got someone watching her mother's house, but again, it's limited surveillance. Our priority has to be gathering enough evidence to make arrests before Marcus realizes what's happening. He's already suspicious of me. Wants to know why I won't quit my job at the diner? Sullivan nodded grimly. How much longer can you maintain your cover? Days, maybe hours. He's getting paranoid, and paranoid criminals make dangerous decisions. Then we need to move fast. I want you to get inside his office, get access to his computer files. We need hard evidence of the money transfers. That's a huge risk. If he catches me, I know, but we've got 2,000 families counting on us to recover their retirement funds. That's got to be worth the risk. Natalie nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Somewhere out there, teachers and firefighters and small business owners were trusting that their pension funds were safe. They had no idea that a narcissistic CEO had been gambling with their futures. "I'll get you what you need," she said, "but I'm going to need backup. If this goes wrong, you'll have it." 3 units positioned around the building. "But Natalie, if Marcus figures out who you really are, your cover won't be the only thing that's blown. This man has already shown he's willing to abandon his pregnant wife. God knows what he'll do to protect his secrets." As Natalie drove back to the diner, she thought about Claire Hartwell, alone and frightened and confined to bed rest, while her husband planned his escape. The woman had no idea that her personal nightmare was about to become a federal case, or that the waitress her husband was leaving her for was actually trying to bring him to justice. But before any of that could happen, Natalie had to survive long enough to gather the evidence they needed. And with Marcus growing more paranoid by the hour, survival was becoming an increasingly uncertain prospect. The phone call came at 6:15 in the morning. Vincent Morrison had been driving to an early meeting with potential investors, taking the winding mountain road that cut through the hills outside the city. It was a route he'd traveled hundreds of times, but this morning, his BMW's brakes had failed on a steep curve. The car went through the guardrail and rolled down a 30-foot embankment, finally coming to rest against a cluster of oak trees. By the time the paramedics arrived, Vincent was unconscious, bleeding from a traumatic head injury. Marcus received the call while he was having breakfast with Natalie at the penthouse. She watched his face carefully as he listened to the voice on the other end, noting how his expression shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like satisfaction. "That's terrible news," Marcus said into the phone. "Yes, of course I'll handle the client meeting." Vincent would want the company to continue operating normally. He hung up and turned to Natalie with what appeared to be genuine concern. "My business partner was in a car accident. He's in critical condition." "Oh my God, that's horrible," Natalie said, and she meant it. "What happened?" "Brake failure, apparently. Poor guy went right through the guardrail on Canyon Road." Natalie felt a chill run down her spine. Canyon Road was notorious for its dangerous curves, but it was also a route that any experienced driver would navigate carefully. Vincent Morrison was former military, trained in defensive driving. The chances of him simply losing control seemed slim. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked. "Too early to tell. He's got a severe head injury. Even if he survives, he might not remember." Marcus caught himself. He might not remember what happened." The correction was telling. Natalie filed it away for her next report to Detective Sullivan. At the hospital, Dr. Cross was finishing her rounds when she encountered Grace Matthews in the corridor. Claire's mother looked exhausted, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "How is she doing?" Dr. Cross asked. "Not well," Grace admitted. "She's following your bed rest orders, but she's constantly anxious. Every time the phone rings, she's terrified it's Marcus with more bad news." "Has he been to see her since the divorce filing?" Grace's expression hardened. "He sent flowers, expensive ones, with a card that said, 'Hope you're feeling better.' Not even an apology." Dr. Cross shook her head. In 20 years of practice, she'd seen plenty of difficult divorces, but abandoning a woman in her third trimester was particularly cruel. "The stress isn't good for either of them," she said. "Claire needs to find ways to relax, to focus on positive things." "Hard to do when your millionaire ex-husband is trying to leave you with nothing," Grace said bitterly. "Ex-husband?" "Well, soon-to-be ex-husband. His lawyers are pushing for a quick settlement. They claim all the marital assets are tied up in business investments that have gone sour." Dr. Cross frowned. "That seems convenient timing. Dairy, doesn't it? Claire's attorney thinks he's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Moving money around, creating shell companies, making himself look broke on paper while hiding millions offshore." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion down the hall. Vincent Morrison was being wheeled in on a gurney, blood covering his face and his expensive suit torn and dirty. "What happened?" Dr. Cross asked one of the paramedics. "Car accident, brake failure on Canyon Road. He's got a severe head injury, possible brain trauma." Grace watched the medical team rush Vincent into surgery, a strange expression on her face. "Do you know him?" Dr. Cross asked. "That's Vincent Morrison, Marcus's business partner. He and his wife came to Claire's baby shower last month." Grace paused, her eyes narrowing. "Funny thing, though. Vincent mentioned that night that he'd just had his car serviced. Brakes, tires, the whole works. Said his mechanic told him everything was in perfect condition? Dr. Cross felt a chill. Accidents happen, even with new brakes. Do they? Or do some accidents get a little help? Meanwhile, Natalie was using her break at the diner to conduct her own investigation. She'd managed to slip into Marcus's office while he was at the hospital, ostensibly to water his plants as the helpful girlfriend who wanted to surprise him. What she'd found there had made her blood run cold. Hidden in a locked desk drawer, she'd discovered a receipt from Murphy's Auto Service, dated 2 days ago. The work order was for Vincent Morrison's BMW, and it included brake line replacement. But according to the receipt, the work had been done by someone named Eddie Kowalski, not the shop's regular mechanics. Natalie had photographed the receipt and run a quick background check on Eddie Kowalski. What she'd found was a man with a criminal record that included charges for assault, extortion, and tampering with vehicles. He was exactly the kind of person someone would hire if they wanted to cause an accident. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Detective Sullivan. Vincent Morrison in critical condition. Suspicious circumstances. Need update ASAP. Natalie typed back, found evidence linking Marcus to brake tampering. Morrison was asking questions about offshore accounts. Marcus silenced him. The response came immediately. This changes everything. Morrison's attempted murder, not just financial fraud. You need to get out now. Can't leave yet. Still need computer access for account numbers. Give me 24 hours. Too dangerous. Abort mission. Negative. 2,000 families counting on this evidence. Will maintain cover until computer access achieved. Natalie deleted the messages and returned to her waitressing duties, but her mind was racing. Marcus wasn't just a white-collar criminal anymore. He was a man willing to commit murder to protect his secrets, and she was living in his penthouse, sharing his bed, completely at his mercy if he discovered her true identity. That evening, Claire was resting in her childhood bedroom at her mother's house when Rebecca Campbell Morrison arrived with updates on the divorce proceedings. Rebecca was a formidable woman in her late 30s, with red hair and green eyes that missed nothing. She'd been Claire's best friend since law school and had built a reputation as one of the city's toughest divorce attorneys. "How are you holding up?" Rebecca asked, settling into the chair beside Claire's bed. "I'm scared," Claire admitted. "Not just about the baby, but about what Marcus might do. This isn't the man I married, Rebecca. There's something different about him now, something cold and calculating." Rebecca pulled out a file folder thick with documents. "Your instincts are right to be concerned. My investigation has uncovered some disturbing patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "Marcus has been systematically moving assets for over a year. Shell companies, offshore accounts, cryptocurrency investments that can't be traced. He's been planning this divorce long before you got pregnant." Claire felt sick. "How much are we talking about?" "Hard to say exactly, but I estimate he's hidden between $50 and $100 million. $100 million? Claire's voice rose in shock. "Where did that kind of money come from?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. His company's revenue doesn't justify that kind of wealth, and his investment portfolio doesn't add up either." Rebecca hesitated, then decided Claire needed to know the full truth. "Claire, I think your husband might be involved in some kind of financial fraud. The numbers just don't make sense otherwise." Before Claire could respond, Grace appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Turn on the news," she said urgently. "Now!" Rebecca grabbed the remote and switched on the television. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Local tech executive critical after mysterious car accident." The reporter was standing outside the hospital where Vincent Morrison lay, fighting for his life. Vincent Morrison, co-founder of Hartwell Technologies, remains in critical condition tonight after his luxury vehicle went through a guardrail on Canyon Road. Police are investigating the cause of the accident, which appears to have been caused by complete brake failure. Claire gripped Rebecca's hand. "Vincent was asking questions about Marcus's business practices. He called me last week, said he was concerned about some financial irregularities at the company. And now he's in a coma with a head injury," Rebecca said grimly. "Convenient timing." Grace sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "Girls, I think we're dealing with something much more dangerous than a nasty divorce." Claire looked down at her swollen belly, where her daughter was moving restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to be very, very careful," Rebecca said, And we're going to document everything. If Marcus is willing to hurt his business partner, there's no telling what he might do to protect his secrets. None of them knew that across town, an FBI agent was asking herself the same question, wondering how long she could maintain her cover before Marcus discovered the truth. The investigation that had started as a routine financial fraud case was rapidly becoming something much more deadly. And at the center of it all was a pregnant woman who had no idea that her personal nightmare was about to explode into a federal criminal case that would destroy everything she'd ever believed about the man she'd married. The diamond ring was enormous, a 5-carat solitaire that caught the fluorescent lights of Mickey's diner and threw rainbows across the cracked Formica table. Natalie stared at it in shock, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth with a forkful of pie. "Marcus, I can't accept this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course you can," Marcus replied, sliding the black velvet box closer to her. "You're going to be my wife, Nat. I want everyone to know that you belong to me." The possessive way he said "belong to me" made Natalie's skin crawl, but she forced herself to smile. Around them, the diner's regular customers had stopped eating to stare at the expensive ring and the well-dressed man proposing to their favorite waitress. "It's beautiful," she managed, slipping the ring onto her finger. The weight of it felt like a shackle. "But Marcus, don't you think we should wait? Your divorce isn't even final yet." Marcus's expression darkened. "My divorce is a formality. Claire will sign whatever papers my lawyers put in front of her. She knows she has no choice. But the baby will be provided for." "I'm not completely heartless, Nat." His tone suggested otherwise. "But I'm done pretending to be something I'm not. I'm done living a lie." The irony wasn't lost on Natalie. Here was a man talking about living authentically while she sat across from him wearing the biggest lie of her professional career. "I have something else to tell you," Marcus continued, leaning closer. "We're leaving the country tomorrow night. I've booked us first-class tickets to the Cayman Islands. From there, we'll go somewhere with no extradition treaties. Switzerland, maybe, or Monaco?" Natalie's blood turned to ice. "Leaving the country? Marcus, I can't just abandon my life here. What about my job? My apartment?" "Your job?" Marcus laughed. "Nat, you're going to be married to a multimillionaire. You'll never have to work again. But this diner is my life. These people are my family." Marcus's eyes hardened. "Your family is whoever I say it is. We leave tomorrow night, and that's final." Natalie excused herself to use the restroom, her mind racing. In the privacy of the bathroom stall, she pulled out her secure phone and sent an urgent message to Detective Sullivan. "He's running tomorrow night. Cayman Islands first stop. Need immediate backup." The response came within seconds. "Negative. Not enough evidence for arrest warrant. Need computer access to offshore accounts. He's suspicious. Won't let me out of his sight. Move to penthouse tonight. Too dangerous. Abort mission. Can't abort. Tomorrow is last chance. Going dark for final push." Natalie deleted the messages and returned to the dining room, where Marcus was paying their check with a $100 bill and telling the manager to keep the change. "Ready to go home?" he asked, wrapping his arm around her waist. "More than ready," she lied. Meanwhile, across town, Rebecca Campbell Morrison was having the most frustrating conversation of her legal career. She sat in her downtown office, surrounded by financial documents and legal briefs, speaking to Claire via video call. "The preliminary asset search confirms what we suspected," Rebecca said. "Marcus has systematically emptied every joint account and hidden the money in shell companies." Claire, propped up in bed with pillows, looked exhausted. "How is that legal?" "It's not, but proving it and recovering the funds are two different things. He's been very careful to make everything look legitimate on paper." "What about the house?" "Mortgaged to the hilt as of last month. He took out a second mortgage and moved the money offshore. On paper, you owe more than the house is worth." Claire's face crumpled. "So I get nothing? After 3 years of marriage and giving up my career?" "I didn't say that." Marcus made one crucial mistake. He filed for divorce in a community property state. Even if he's hidden the assets, you're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. "But if we can't find the money," "Then we make his life very uncomfortable until he produces it. I've already filed motions to freeze his passport and all known accounts. He's not leaving the country until this is settled. Rebecca didn't mention that she'd tried to file the passport freeze 3 times, only to be told by the court clerk that Marcus's travel documents were protected by some kind of federal hold. Someone else was already monitoring Marcus Hartwell, and Rebecca was beginning to suspect she knew who. At that moment, Vincent Morrison's wife was sitting beside her husband's hospital bed, holding his hand and willing him to wake up. Sarah Morrison was a nurse herself, and she understood the severity of Vincent's injuries better than most. The traumatic brain injury had caused swelling that required surgical intervention. Even if Vincent survived, there was no guarantee he'd remember anything about the weeks leading up to his accident. The doctors called it retrograde amnesia, a common side effect of severe head trauma. But Sarah Morrison knew her husband better than any doctor. She'd seen him troubled and distracted in the days before the accident, spending hours on the phone with lawyers and accountants. He'd been investigating something at Hartwell Technologies, something that had kept him awake at night. "Mrs. Morrison?" Sarah turned to see a man in a suit standing in the doorway. He had the look of law enforcement, from his conservative haircut to his polished shoes. "I'm Detective Ray Sullivan, FBI. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband's work." Sarah's heart skipped. "FBI? Is Vincent in some kind of trouble?" "We don't think so, ma'am, but we believe he may have uncovered evidence of criminal activity at his company." "Did he mention anything about financial irregularities or concerns about his business partner?" Sarah nodded slowly. "He'd been asking questions about offshore accounts and unusual money transfers. He thought Marcus was hiding assets from the divorce, but it seemed like more than that." "Did he keep any records at home? Documents or files that might help our investigation?" "He has a home office. There are files there, but I don't know what's in them." Detective Sullivan handed her his card. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to understand something. If your husband was investigating Marcus Hartwell's business practices, his accident might not have been an accident." Sarah's face went pale. "You think Marcus tried to kill him?" "I think your husband discovered something that made him dangerous to some very powerful people, and I think those people decided to silence him permanently." The weight of Sullivan's words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Vincent wasn't just fighting for his life. He'd been targeted for elimination by someone he'd trusted as a partner and friend. "What can I do to help?" she asked. "Give me access to those files. And Mrs. Morrison, be very careful who you trust. If Vincent was targeted for what he knew, you might be in danger too." That evening, Natalie found herself trapped in Marcus's penthouse, playing the role of the loving fiancé, while her FBI training screamed warnings about the danger she was in. Marcus had insisted on cooking dinner for her, a romantic gesture that felt more like a cage closing around her. "To new beginnings," Marcus said, raising his wine glass. "To new beginnings," Natalie echoed, hating the words even as she spoke them. After dinner, Marcus excused himself to make some business calls, leaving Natalie alone in the living room. This was her chance, possibly her last chance, to access his computer and get the evidence Sullivan needed. She crept to Marcus's home office, her heart pounding. The computer was password protected, but Natalie had spent months observing Marcus's habits. She tried his birthday, then his social security number, then variations of his company name. Nothing worked. Frustrated, she tried Nat Williams 6, her cover identity's name and supposed age. The screen unlocked immediately. "Narcissistic bastard," she muttered, navigating to his financial files. What she found there made her hands shake. Bank transfers totaling over $200 million. Account numbers in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Monaco. Client lists showing pension funds that had been systematically drained. Most chilling of all was a document labeled contingency plans. It contained detailed instructions for liquidating assets, destroying evidence, and eliminating potential witnesses. Vincent Morrison's name was at the top of the list. Claire Hartwell's name was second. Natalie photographed everything she could, uploading the files to a secure FBI server while praying Marcus wouldn't return early. She was just closing the computer when she heard footsteps in the hallway. "Nat, what are you doing in there?" Natalie's blood turned to ice. She quickly moved to the bookshelf, pretending to examine his collection of business biographies. "Just admiring your library," she called out. "You have some interesting books." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Find anything fascinating? The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Very appropriate for a businessman. Indeed, know your enemy better than yourself. Sonam, the way he looked at her when he said enemy made Natalie's skin crawl. Did he suspect something? Or was she just being paranoid? Ready for bed? Marcus asked, his arm snaking around her waist. Actually, I'm feeling a little nauseous. Must have been something I ate. Marcus's grip tightened slightly. That's unfortunate. You'll need to feel better by tomorrow. We have a long journey ahead of us. As they walked toward the bedroom, Natalie caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror. The engagement ring glittered on her finger like a warning, and for the first time in 8 months of undercover work, she wondered if she was going to survive the night. Behind them, Marcus's computer screensaver activated, displaying a slideshow of photos from his relationship with Nat. But hidden in the computer's encrypted files were the financial records that would eventually bring down his entire criminal empire. If Natalie lived long enough to testify about what she'd found, the call came to Detective Sullivan at 11:47 p.m., jolting him from an uneasy sleep. The voice on the other end was tense, professional, but edged with fear. This is Agent Brooks. I have the files. He's planning to eliminate Claire tomorrow before we leave the country. You need to move now. Sullivan was instantly alert, grabbing a pen and notepad from his nightstand. What kind of timeline are we looking at? He told me we're leaving tomorrow night, but I found a document on his computer. Claire's name is on a hit list. Vincent Morrison was first. We both know how that turned out. Where are you now? His penthouse. He thinks I'm sick, but I don't think he believes it. Ray, I think he's starting to suspect something. The line went silent for a moment, and Sullivan could hear voices in the background. I have to go, Natalie whispered. He's coming back. Whatever you're going to do it fast. The line went dead. Sullivan was already reaching for his clothes when his phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from an unknown number. This is Rebecca Campbell Morrison, Claire Hartwell's attorney. We need to talk. Urgent. Within an hour, Sullivan found himself in an all-night coffee shop downtown, sitting across from a red-haired woman who looked like she hadn't slept in days. You're FBI, Rebecca said without preamble. It wasn't a question. What makes you say that? Because someone filed a federal hold on Marcus Hartwell's passport, and it wasn't me. Because Vincent Morrison's accident has all the hallmarks of a professional hit. And because my private investigator found surveillance equipment near Claire's mother's house. Sullivan studied the attorney carefully. Rebecca Campbell Morrison had a reputation as one of the city's toughest divorce lawyers, someone who didn't back down from a fight. Right now, she looked like a woman who'd stumbled into something much bigger than a contentious divorce. What do you know about your client's husband? Sullivan asked. I know he's been systematically hiding assets for over a year. I know he's moved at least $50 million offshore, and I know he's desperate enough to hurt people who get in his way. Sullivan made a decision. Mrs. Campbell Morrison, I'm going to tell you something that doesn't leave this table. Marcus Hartwell is under federal investigation for securities fraud. We have evidence that he's stolen over $200 million from pension funds. Rebecca's face went white. $200 million? That's what we've confirmed so far. The actual number could be higher. And Claire is in danger. We have intelligence suggesting that Marcus plans to eliminate potential witnesses before he flees the country. Your client's name is on that list. Rebecca gripped her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles turned white. What can we do? We need to get Claire to safety tonight. Do you think you can convince her to leave her mother's house without causing a panic? She's on bed rest. The doctor said bed rest to prevent premature labor, but she's at 32 weeks now. If the baby comes, it's viable. Her life is more important than her pregnancy complications. Rebecca nodded grimly. What about Marcus? When are you arresting him? As soon as we can do it safely. We have an undercover agent in position, but she's in extreme danger. If Marcus realizes who she is, the waitress, Rebecca said suddenly. Claire mentioned that Marcus left her for some young waitress. That's your agent, isn't it? Sullivan didn't answer directly, but his expression confirmed her suspicions. Jesus, how long has she been undercover? 8 months. Long enough to gather evidence of the fraud, but not long enough to prevent Marcus from escalating to violence. Meanwhile, across town, Claire was trying to sleep when she heard a car pull into her mother's driveway. Grace had gone to bed hours ago, and they weren't expecting anyone. Claire's heart began to race as she heard footsteps on the front porch. The doorbell rang once, then again. Claire grabbed her phone, ready to call 911, when she heard Rebecca's voice calling softly. "Claire, it's me. Open the door." Claire made her way slowly downstairs, her pregnancy making her movements awkward and labored. She opened the door to find Rebecca standing there with a man she didn't recognize. "Rebecca, what's wrong? It's almost 1 a.m. We need to talk. Can we come in?" Grace appeared at the top of the stairs wearing a bathrobe and looking concerned. "What's going on?" "Mom, it's okay. It's just Rebecca." They gathered in the living room, where Detective Sullivan introduced himself and explained the situation in terms that Claire could understand without revealing classified details. "Mrs. Hartwell, we have reason to believe that your husband is involved in criminal activity that goes far beyond hiding assets in your divorce. We think he may try to harm you to prevent you from testifying in a federal investigation." Claire felt the baby kick violently, as if responding to her mother's stress. "You think Marcus wants to hurt me?" "Ma'am, your husband's business partner is in a coma because he asked too many questions. We have evidence suggesting that Vincent Morrison's brake lines were tampered with." Grace gasped. "Vincent's accident wasn't an accident?" "We don't think so. And Mrs. Hartwell, we found a document on your husband's computer that suggests you might be next." Claire sank into her chair, her hands protectively cradling her belly. "What kind of document?" Sullivan exchanged a glance with Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly. "A contingency plan, a list of people who might pose a threat to his escape plans. Your name is on that list." The room fell silent except for the ticking of Grace's antique clock on the mantelpiece. "What do you want me to do?" Claire asked finally. "We want to move you to a safe house tonight, somewhere Marcus can't find you while we finish gathering evidence." "I'm on bed rest. The doctor said—" "Claire," Rebecca interrupted gently, "if Marcus is willing to kill to protect his secrets, bed rest isn't going to matter if you're not alive to benefit from it." Grace stood up decisively. "I'll pack our bags." "Mrs. Matthews, I appreciate your concern for your daughter, but—" "Detective Sullivan," Grace said firmly, "I raised Claire by myself after her father died. I protected her then, and I'll protect her now. Wherever she goes, I go." Sullivan nodded. "Fair enough. Fair. But we need to leave within the hour. Can you be ready?" As Grace hurried upstairs to pack, Claire turned to Rebecca with tears in her eyes. "How did this happen? How did my marriage turn into a federal criminal case?" "I don't know, honey. But we're going to get through this. You and the baby are going to be safe." Sullivan's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. This time the message made his blood run cold. "He knows something. Getting suspicious. May need immediate extraction." It was from Natalie, and it meant that the most dangerous part of the operation was just beginning. At the penthouse, Marcus stood in his office doorway, staring at his computer screen. Someone had been using his computer while he was on his business calls. The file modification timestamps told the story. Someone had accessed his financial records, his offshore account information, and most damning of all, his contingency plans. Only one person had been in his office tonight. Marcus walked quietly to the bedroom, where Natalie lay curled under the covers, apparently asleep. In the dim light from the hallway, he could see her face, so young and innocent looking, so perfect for the role she'd been playing. But Marcus hadn't built a multi-million-dollar company by trusting appearances. He'd survived in the cutthroat world of tech by being paranoid, by questioning everything and everyone. And right now, everything about Nat Williams was starting to feel like a lie. He pulled out his phone and made a call to a private investigator he'd used for sensitive matters in the past. "Eddie, it's Marcus Hartwell. I need a deep background check on someone. Name is Nat Williams, 26 years old, works at Mickey's Diner. I need everything. Employment history, family background, financial records. And Eddie, I need it in 2 hours." He ended the call and looked back at the woman in his bed. If Nat Williams was who she claimed to be, the background check would confirm it. But if she was someone else, if she was working for law enforcement or a rival company or anyone who wanted to hurt him, he would know soon enough. And then he would deal with her the same way he dealt with Vincent Morrison. Marcus smiled coldly in the darkness. By tomorrow night, he and Nat would be on a plane to the Cayman Islands, and all his problems would be solved. Claire would be dead. Vincent would never wake up to tell his story, and anyone else who might threaten his new life would be eliminated. He had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let anyone destroy his carefully constructed escape plan. Even if that someone was the woman he thought he loved. The safe house was a nondescript ranch home in the suburbs, the kind of place that would blend invisibly into any middle-class neighborhood. Claire sat in the living room at 3 a.m., watching two FBI agents position surveillance equipment while Rebecca made coffee in the kitchen. Grace had finally fallen asleep on the couch, emotionally exhausted by the night's revelations. Detective Sullivan finished a phone call and approached Claire with a grim expression. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need to prepare you for what's going to happen over the next 24 hours. You're going to arrest Marcus? We're going to try, but first we need to extract our undercover agent safely. She's gathered enough evidence to convict your husband of securities fraud, but she's in extreme danger." Claire felt the baby shift restlessly inside her, responding to her elevated stress levels. The waitress he's been seeing, she's FBI. Yes, and right now she's trapped in his penthouse with a man who's killed once and is prepared to kill again. The irony wasn't lost on Claire. The woman Marcus had left her for, the woman who'd been the catalyst for her world falling apart, was actually trying to bring him to justice. "What happens to me after you arrest him?" Sullivan sat down across from her, his expression kind but serious. "That depends on several factors. The money he stole will need to be recovered and returned to the pension funds. His personal assets will be frozen pending trial. You'll likely be entitled to some financial support, but nothing like the lifestyle you're used to." Claire laughed bitterly. "The lifestyle I'm used to was built on stolen money from retirees and families. I don't want any of it. Mrs. Hartwell, you're about to be a single mother. You'll need resources to support your daughter." "I'll figure it out. I had a career before I married Marcus. I can rebuild." Sullivan nodded approvingly. In his experience, the victims who survived these kinds of situations were the ones who found strength in starting over, rather than wallowing in what they'd lost. Meanwhile, across town, Natalie was discovering that 8 months of undercover work hadn't prepared her for the psychological warfare Marcus was capable of. She woke at 6 a.m. to find him sitting in a chair beside the bed, fully dressed, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, but there was something cold in his voice that made her instantly alert. "Morning," she replied, sitting up carefully. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep. Too excited about our trip." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Nat, I've been thinking about our relationship. 8 months is a long time to be with someone, don't you think?" "I suppose. Why?" "It's just interesting how well we fit together from the very beginning. Almost like you knew exactly what I needed to hear, exactly how to make me feel better about my problems." Natalie's blood turned to ice, but she kept her expression neutral. "I care about you, Marcus. Of course I want to make you feel better." "Of course." He turned back to her, and she saw something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "Tell me about your family, Nat. Your childhood." This was dangerous territory. Natalie had rehearsed her cover story hundreds of times, but Marcus's tone suggested this wasn't casual conversation. "I grew up in Ohio. Small town, working-class family. My dad worked at a factory. My mom was a secretary." "What was your father's name?" "Robert. Robert Williams." "And what factory did he work at?" Natalie felt sweat beading on her forehead. These were details she'd memorized, but Marcus's interrogation felt like a trap. "Eastman Manufacturing. They made automotive parts." Marcus nodded slowly. "Eastman Manufacturing in Ohio. Interesting." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through what appeared to be an email. "I had a private investigator do a little background check on you last night. Just routine, you understand. When you're as wealthy as I am, you have to be careful about the people you let into your life." Natalie's heart began to race, but she forced herself to appear confused rather than terrified. "A background check? Marcus, that's a little paranoid, don't you think?" "Is it? Because according to my investigator, there's no record of a Robert Williams ever working at Eastman Manufacturing. In fact, there's no record of Eastman Manufacturing ever existing in Ohio." The silence that followed felt like eternity. Natalie's FBI training kicked in, calculating distances to exits, potential weapons, ways to signal for help. But she was trapped 30 floors above the street with a man who'd already committed murder once. "That's impossible," she said, trying to sound confused rather than caught. "Maybe your investigator made a mistake." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My investigator is very thorough. He also couldn't find any employment records for you before you started working at Mickey's Diner. No previous addresses, no tax returns, no credit history. It's almost like Nat Williams didn't exist until 8 months ago." "Marcus, you're scaring me. I don't understand what you're suggesting." "What I'm suggesting," Marcus said, moving closer to the bed, "is that you're not who you pretend to be. What I'm suggesting is that you're working for someone who wants to hurt me." Natalie's training told her to maintain her cover as long as possible, but her instincts told her that Marcus was past the point of believing any story she might tell. "You're being paranoid," she tried one last time. "I love you, Marcus. Why would I lie to you?" "Because you're either a corporate spy, a federal agent, or working for one of my competitors. And honestly, I don't care which one it is anymore." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at her chest. "The only question now is whether you're going to tell me the truth or whether I'm going to have to hurt you until you do." Natalie stared at the gun, her mind racing through possibilities. She could try to talk her way out of this, but Marcus was clearly past the point of believing anything she said. She could try to overpower him, but he was bigger and stronger, and he had the advantage of the weapon. Or she could drop her cover completely and hope that her FBI backup was close enough to save her life. "My name is Natalie Brooks," she said quietly. "I'm Special Agent Natalie Brooks, FBI. I've been investigating you for securities fraud for 8 months. Marcus's expression didn't change, as if he'd expected this confirmation. "There we go. The truth at last. Marcus, you need to know that this building is surrounded. There's no way out of this situation that doesn't end with you in federal prison." "Is that so?" "Well, Agent Brooks, I guess we'll find out." He gestured toward the door with the gun. "Get dressed. We're going to take a little trip." "Where?" "To see my wife. I think it's time Claire met the woman who's been pretending to love her husband." Natalie's blood ran cold. She'd gathered enough evidence to convict Marcus of fraud, but she hadn't been able to prevent him from targeting Claire. Now both women were going to pay the price for his desperation. As she pulled on her clothes, Natalie activated the panic button hidden in her jewelry. Somewhere across the city, Detective Sullivan would be getting an emergency signal, but would help arrive in time to prevent Marcus from completing his deadly mission. "Don't even think about running," Marcus said as they prepared to leave the penthouse. "I've got nothing left to lose now, Agent Brooks. That makes me extremely dangerous." Natalie believed him. Marcus Hartwell had crossed the line from white-collar criminal to potential killer, and she was about to find out just how far he was willing to go to protect his secrets. The elevator descended toward the parking garage, carrying them toward what could be the final confrontation in a case that had started as financial fraud and escalated into something much more deadly. In her secure communications device, Natalie's panic signal pulsed steadily, a silent scream for help that she could only hope would be answered in time. The panic signal reached Detective Sullivan at 6:43 a.m. He was already awake, coordinating the complex operation to arrest Marcus Hartwell while ensuring the safety of both his undercover agent and Claire Hartwell. The steady beeping from Natalie's emergency beacon sent ice through his veins. "She's blown," he announced to the tactical team assembled in the FBI command center. "Brooks has been made. We need immediate response." Agent Martinez, the team leader, studied the building schematics on his tablet. "Hartwell's penthouse is on the 30th floor. Single point of entry through the elevator or emergency stairs. If he's got her at gunpoint, we can't risk a frontal assault," Sullivan agreed. "Too many ways for this to go wrong." His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Natalie's device. "Traveling to secondary location. Subject armed and extremely dangerous. Claire Hartwell primary target." Sullivan's blood pressure spiked. "He's moving her, and he's going after Claire." "Sir, the safe house." "Change of plans. Get me a direct line to the safe house and mobilize SWAT teams for both locations. This bastard is not getting near Claire Hartwell." At the safe house, Claire was experiencing what she hoped were Braxton Hicks contractions when Sullivan's call came through. The FBI agents assigned to her protection answered on the first ring. "Agent Peterson." This is Sullivan, code red. The subject is mobile and headed your way. How's our witness? Peterson looked across the room to where Claire was sitting with her mother, both women looking increasingly stressed as they sensed the tension in the room. She's having some contractions, but she says they're irregular. Could be false labor again. Let's hope so, because we may need to move her fast. Sir, she's at 32 weeks. Moving a woman in active labor is preferable to letting a killer get his hands on her. Keep me updated. Sullivan hung up and turned to his tactical coordinator. How long until we have units in position around the safe house? 20 minutes for full perimeter, 10 minutes for first responders. Marcus Hartwell drives a black BMW license plate. Sullivan consulted his notes. Charlie Echo Oscar 729. I want eyes on that vehicle the moment it gets within 5 miles of the safe house. Meanwhile, in the BMW racing through the early morning traffic, Natalie was trying to calculate her options. Marcus had zip-tied her hands behind her back and was driving with one hand while keeping the gun trained on her with the other. You know, she said, trying to keep her voice conversational, kidnapping a federal agent is going to add serious time to your sentence. My sentence? Marcus laughed grimly. Agent Brooks, I'm not planning on standing trial. You think you can shoot your way out of this? I think I can eliminate the witnesses and disappear to a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. It's amazing how far $200 million can take you. Natalie studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw and the way his knuckles were white where they gripped the steering wheel. Marcus Hartwell was a man who'd convinced himself he had no choice but to commit murder to protect his freedom. What about your daughter, she asked. You're willing to make her an orphan to save yourself? For a moment, something flickered across Marcus's expression. Regret, maybe, or the ghost of paternal love. But it was gone almost instantly. My daughter will be better off without me in her life. Claire will remarry eventually, some boring accountant or lawyer who'll be a proper father figure. You really believe that? That she'll be better off knowing her father was a murderer? She'll never know what really happened. Accidents happen all the time, Agent Brooks. Gas leaks, house fires, carbon monoxide poisoning. Very sad, very tragic, and very difficult to prove otherwise. The casual way he discussed murdering his pregnant wife made Natalie's skin crawl. She'd worked undercover cases involving drug dealers and organized crime bosses. But there was something particularly chilling about Marcus's cold calculation. Her secure phone, hidden in her boot, buzzed with an incoming message. Using techniques she'd learned in FBI training, Natalie managed to activate the phone's tracking beacon by pressing her heel against the device. Even if she didn't survive the next few hours, law enforcement would be able to follow their route. At the safe house, Claire's contractions were becoming more regular and more intense. Grace sat beside her daughter, timing the intervals and growing increasingly worried. Honey, I think these might be real this time, Grace said gently. They can't be real, Claire protested, even as another wave of pain gripped her abdomen. It's too early. The baby isn't ready. Dr. Cross had given Grace her personal number for emergencies, and Grace decided this qualified. The obstetrician answered on the second ring. Dr. Cross, this is Grace Matthews. Claire's contractions are 5 minutes apart and lasting about 40 seconds each. How long has this been going on? About 2 hours. She keeps saying it's false labor, but at 32 weeks, we need to take this seriously. Can you bring her to the hospital? Grace looked around the safe house, where FBI agents were positioning themselves for a potential assault and speaking in hushed, urgent tones into their radios. We're in a bit of a complicated situation right now. Is there any way you could come to us? Dr. Cross had delivered enough babies to know when a situation was unusual, and Grace Matthews didn't sound like a woman dealing with normal labor complications. Text me the address. I'll bring my emergency kit and be there in 20 minutes. Dr. Cross, you might want to prepare yourself. This isn't a normal house call. Meanwhile, Detective Sullivan was coordinating the largest law enforcement operation of his career. In addition to the SWAT teams converging on the safe house, he had units positioned around Hartwell Technologies, Marcus's penthouse, and every major route out of the city. Sir, we have visual confirmation on the subject's vehicle, Agent Martinez reported. Black BMW heading west on Maple Avenue. 2 occupants. That puts him about 15 minutes from the safe house. Are our perimeter teams in position? Yes, sir. But, sir, we have another problem. Mrs. Hartwell appears to be in active labor. Sullivan closed his eyes and counted to 10. In 20 years of law enforcement, he'd never had to coordinate the arrest of a dangerous criminal while simultaneously overseeing the delivery of a baby. Get me a phone line to the safe house. I need to talk to Claire Hartwell directly. Agent Peterson handed Claire the secure phone, his expression apologetic. Ma'am, this is Detective Sullivan. I need to ask you a very important question. What kind of question? Claire gasped, gripping her mother's hand as another contraction hit. Are you in labor? Real labor, not false contractions? Claire wanted to lie, to tell him it was nothing serious, but the pain was becoming impossible to ignore. I think so. The contractions are getting stronger and closer together. Mrs. Hartwell, your husband is about 10 minutes away from your location. He's armed, he's dangerous, and he's coming there with the intention of hurting you. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The contraction passed, leaving Claire breathless but clear-headed. You're telling me that my husband wants to kill me while I'm having his baby. Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Claire looked around the safe house, seeing it with new eyes. The FBI agents weren't just there to protect her. They were there to stop a killer, and she was about to give birth in the middle of what could become a war zone. Detective Sullivan, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. I need you to promise me something. What's that, ma'am? I need you to promise me that my daughter will survive this, even if I don't. Mrs. Hartwell, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure both of you survive this. Another contraction hit, this one strong enough to double her over with pain. Grace checked her watch. 4 minutes since the last one. Detective, Grace said, taking the phone from her daughter. I think you'd better get that doctor here fast. This baby is coming, whether Marcus Hartwell wants to stop it or not. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching. Dr. Cross arriving with her medical kit, FBI backup units taking their positions, and somewhere in the maze of suburban streets, a black BMW carrying a desperate man and his FBI hostage. Dr. Cross burst through the front door of the safe house, carrying a medical bag and wearing scrubs under her coat. She took one look at Claire, who was gripping the arm of a sofa and breathing heavily through another contraction, and immediately shifted into crisis mode. How far apart are they now? She asked Grace while pulling on surgical gloves. 3 minutes, and they're getting stronger. Dr. Cross knelt beside Claire and performed a quick examination. Claire, honey, you're at 6 centimeters dilated. This baby is definitely coming today. But it's too early, Claire gasped. 32 weeks. 32 weeks is premature, but it's viable. We have excellent survival rates for babies born at this stage. Dr. Cross looked around at the FBI agents positioning themselves throughout the house. Though I have to say, this is the most unusual delivery room I've ever worked in. Agent Peterson appeared at her side. Doctor, how long until the baby arrives? Hard to say exactly. First babies can take time, but her labor is progressing quickly. Could be anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours. Peterson spoke into his radio. Command, this is Peterson. The witness is in active labor. Doctor estimates delivery within 2 to 6 hours. Detective Sullivan's voice crackled back immediately. Understood. Subject vehicle is now 3 minutes from your location. All units, this is not a drill. We have a pregnant woman in active labor and an armed fugitive en route. Rules of engagement are clear. Protect the civilians at all costs. Marcus's BMW turned onto Elm Street, the quiet residential road where the safe house sat indistinguishably among a dozen other ranch homes. He'd driven this route twice during his reconnaissance, mapping escape routes and noting potential obstacles. Last chance to tell me where they're keeping Claire, he said to Natalie, the gun still trained on her despite the awkward angle required while driving. I already told you. I don't know where they moved her. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Natalie had been briefed on the safe house location before going dark for her final evidence-gathering mission, but she would die before giving Marcus the information he needed to hurt Claire and her unborn daughter. Marcus pulled the car to the curb 2 blocks away from the safe house, parking behind a delivery truck that provided cover from the street. Here's what's going to happen, he said, checking his pistol. You're going to walk with me to that house, and you're going to get me inside. Any tricks, any signals to your FBI friends, and I start shooting civilians. starting with you. Marcus, please think about what you're doing. Your daughter's about to be born. Do you really want her first moments in this world to be surrounded by violence? For a split second, Natalie saw the man Marcus might have been in another life. A father excited about his daughter's birth, a husband supporting his wife through labor. But that man had been buried under layers of greed, desperation, and narcissistic rage. My daughter will understand someday that her father did what he had to do to protect their future. As they walked down Elm Street, Natalie spotted the FBI surveillance positions. Agents in unmarked cars, snipers on nearby rooftops, tactical units positioned in backyards. Marcus was walking into the most sophisticated law enforcement net she'd ever seen deployed, but he was also walking toward a house where a woman was giving birth, surrounded by people who would do anything to protect her. The potential for catastrophic crossfire was enormous. Inside the safe house, Claire was experiencing the strongest contraction yet when Agent Peterson's radio crackled to life. All units, subjects are on foot, approaching from the east. 2 individuals, suspect is armed. Dr. Cross looked up from checking Claire's vital signs. I need to get her into a better position for delivery. Can we move her to the bedroom? Negative, Peterson said firmly. We need to keep her in the center of the house, away from windows and potential lines of fire. Then we deliver this baby right here on the living room floor. Grace gathered towels and blankets while Dr. Cross set up a sterile field around Claire. Despite the chaos surrounding them, the process of birth continued with its own relentless timeline. I can see the head, Dr. Cross announced. Claire, I need you to push with the next contraction. Outside, Marcus and Natalie had reached the front yard of the safe house. Marcus could see movement behind the curtained windows and knew that his wife was inside, probably terrified and certainly unaware that the father of her child was about to become her executioner. Ring the doorbell, he instructed Natalie. Tell them you need to speak with Claire urgently. They'll know it's a trap. Maybe, but they'll also know that if they don't let me in, I'll find another way, and that way might involve a lot more collateral damage. Natalie approached the front door, her mind racing through possibilities. She could shout a warning, but Marcus would start shooting immediately. She could refuse to cooperate, but again, the result would be gunfire with Claire and her baby caught in the crossfire. Or she could trust that her FBI colleagues had prepared for this exact scenario. She rang the doorbell. FBI, she called out clearly. Agent Brooks requesting immediate entry. Emergency situation. The door opened to reveal Agent Peterson, his weapon drawn but held low. Behind him, Natalie could hear the sounds of a woman in advanced labor. Claire's heavy breathing, Dr. Cross giving medical instructions, Grace offering words of encouragement. Agent Brooks, Peterson said carefully, noting her zip-tied hands and the way she held herself. Are you alone? Before she could answer, Marcus stepped into view, his gun pressed against her temple. No, she's not, Marcus said. And unless you want to see a federal agent's brains splattered across your doorstep, you're going to let us both inside. Peterson spoke quietly into his radio while raising his hands to show he wasn't threatening. Command, we have a hostage situation at the front door. Agent Brooks is compromised, suspect is armed, and using her as a shield. Marcus pushed past Peterson into the living room, dragging Natalie with him. What he saw there stopped him cold. Claire was lying on a makeshift delivery bed, surrounded by towels and medical equipment. Dr. Cross knelt between her legs, coaching her through another contraction. Grace held Claire's hand, murmuring words of comfort and strength. It was a scene of new life entering the world, the most natural and beautiful process in human existence. And Marcus was about to destroy it. Hello, Claire, he said, his voice eerily calm. I came to meet our daughter. Claire turned toward his voice, her eyes widening in shock and terror. Marcus, what are you doing here? I'm here to tie up some loose ends before I leave the country. Unfortunately, you and the federal agent here have become complications that need to be resolved. Dr. Cross never stopped monitoring Claire's condition, but she spoke without looking up. Mr. Hartwell, your wife is in the final stages of labor. Your daughter is about to be born. Whatever issues you have with other people, surely they can wait until after. My daughter is being born into a world where her father is a wanted criminal and her mother is a federal witness, Marcus interrupted. That's not the future I plan for her. Another contraction gripped Claire, this one so intense that she cried out in pain. Dr. Cross checked her progress and announced, "The baby is crowning. Claire, I need you to push now." Despite the terror surrounding her, despite the gun pointed at her head and the knowledge that her husband wanted to kill her, Claire focused on the one thing that mattered more than anything else, bringing her daughter safely into the world. She pushed with everything she had. "I can see her head," Dr. Cross said excitedly. "She has dark hair, just like her mother." Marcus stared at the scene unfolding before him, his gun wavering slightly. For a moment, the reality of what was happening penetrated his narcissistic rage. His daughter, his flesh and blood, was being born right in front of him. That moment of distraction was exactly what Natalie had been waiting for. Using a combat technique she'd learned in FBI training, she threw her weight backward into Marcus, knocking him off balance. The gun fired, but the shot went harmlessly into the ceiling. Immediately, the front door exploded inward as SWAT officers flooded into the house. Marcus struggled to regain control of his weapon, but Natalie had managed to twist around and was fighting him for the gun despite her bound hands. "Federal agents!" the SWAT team leader shouted. "Drop the weapon!" In the chaos, Dr. Cross never stopped working. "One more push, Claire. Your daughter is almost here." Grace shielded her daughter as much as possible while FBI agents swarmed around them. Agent Peterson had his weapon trained on Marcus, waiting for a clear shot that wouldn't endanger the civilians. Marcus managed to break free from Natalie's grip and raised his gun toward Claire, his face contorted with desperate rage. But before he could pull the trigger, a single shot rang out. Agent Peterson's bullet caught Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon clattering across the floor. He collapsed, bleeding and defeated as FBI agents swarmed over him. At that exact moment, Claire gave one final push, and her daughter slipped into the world with a lusty cry that filled the house. "She's here," Dr. Cross announced, lifting the tiny pink baby for everyone to see. "She's beautiful, and she's breathing perfectly." Claire sobbed with relief and exhaustion as Dr. Cross placed her daughter on her chest. The baby was small but clearly healthy, her cries strong and indignant at being thrust into such a chaotic world. "What's her name?" Grace asked through her own tears. Claire looked down at her daughter, then over at Agent Peterson, who was securing Marcus's weapon while paramedics attended to his gunshot wound. "Emma," she said firmly. "Her name is Emma Grace Hartwell, and she's going to grow up knowing that sometimes the worst situations bring out the best in people." Natalie, now freed from her restraints, knelt beside Claire. "She's beautiful. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of this." Claire looked at the FBI agent who had risked her life to bring Marcus to justice. The woman whose deception had initially seemed like the ultimate betrayal, but had ultimately saved both their lives. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." As paramedics loaded Marcus into an ambulance and prepared to transport Claire and baby Emma to the hospital, Detective Sullivan surveyed the scene with satisfaction, mixed with amazement. In 32 years of law enforcement, he'd never seen a case that ended with the arrest of a dangerous criminal and the delivery of a healthy baby in the same room. "Hell of a thing," Agent Peterson commented, watching as Dr. Cross supervised Emma's first medical examination. "Hell of a thing," Sullivan agreed, "but sometimes justice and new life arrive at exactly the same moment." Outside, Marcus Hartwell was being read his rights while paramedics worked to stop the bleeding from his shoulder wound. His empire of fraud had collapsed. His freedom was gone, and his family was lost to him forever. But inside the safe house, baby Emma continued to cry with the strength of a fighter, announcing her arrival to a world that had already tested her courage before she'd taken her first breath. She was her mother's daughter, and she would be just fine. 3 weeks after Emma's dramatic birth, Claire sat in the sunroom of her mother's house, nursing her daughter while morning sunlight streamed through the windows. Emma had thrived despite her premature arrival, gaining weight steadily and developing the fierce appetite of a fighter. The media attention had been overwhelming at first. "CEO arrested during wife's labor," the headlines screamed. "FBI sting operation ends in dramatic birth." But Rebecca had skillfully managed the press, ensuring that Claire's privacy was protected while the full scope of Marcus's crimes became public. Vincent Morrison knocked softly on the door before entering, his recovery from the car accident nothing short of miraculous. The brain swelling had subsided, and while he still experienced occasional headaches, his memory had returned completely. "How are my girls doing today?" he asked, settling into the chair beside Claire. "We're good," Claire said, smiling at the man who had become like a brother to her. "Emma's putting on weight, and I'm feeling stronger every day." Vincent watched the baby nurse with the wonder of someone who'd almost died before seeing this miracle. "She looks just like you. Thank God she doesn't have Marcus's eyes." "Vincent, you don't have to keep apologizing for not realizing what Marcus was doing sooner." "I was his partner, Claire. I should have seen the signs." "He fooled everyone. Even the FBI needed 8 months to gather enough evidence." Detective Sullivan had visited the previous week to update Claire on the case's progress. Marcus had been denied bail and was being held in federal custody pending trial. The evidence Natalie had gathered, combined with Vincent's financial records and testimony from defrauded investors, had built an overwhelming case against him. "He'll plead guilty eventually," Sullivan had explained. "Probably try to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for helping us recover more of the stolen funds." "How much will the victims get back?" Claire had asked. "Maybe 60 cents on the dollar if we're lucky." A lot of the money was moved through cryptocurrency exchanges and offshore banks that don't cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. The human cost of Marcus's crimes was staggering. Detective Sullivan had shared some of the victim impact statements with Claire. Stories of retirees who'd lost their entire life savings, teachers whose pension funds had evaporated, families who trusted their futures to a man who viewed them as nothing more than sources of easy money. Rebecca entered the sunroom carrying a stack of legal documents and wearing the expression of a lawyer who'd been working 18-hour days. "How are we doing, ladies?" she asked, accepting the cup of coffee Grace offered. "Better than we have any right to be," Claire replied. "What's the latest from the lawyers?" "Mixed news. The good news is that the federal prosecutor has agreed to exempt you from any criminal liability. They recognize that you were a victim, not an accomplice. And the bad news? The civil litigation is going to be complex and lengthy. The bankruptcy trustee wants to recover assets for the victims, which means they're going to scrutinize every penny you received during your marriage." Claire had expected this. The house, the cars, the expensive clothes and jewelry, all of it had been purchased with stolen money. Keeping any of it would mean profiting from the suffering of thousands of innocent people. "I want to give it all back," she said firmly. "Claire, you need to think about Emma's future. You're entitled to some spousal support, and Rebecca, I can't build my daughter's future on money stolen from retirees and teachers. I won't do it." Rebecca sighed, recognizing the stubborn determination that had helped Claire survive the past few months. "Then we negotiate. You keep enough to get back on your feet, maybe a small settlement for the emotional distress and the fact that you were deceived about the source of the marital assets. But you're right about the bulk of it. It needs to go back to the victims." Vincent leaned forward in his chair. "What about your career? Are you thinking about going back to marketing?" Claire had been considering this question for weeks. Before Marcus, she'd been on the fast track to partner at a prestigious marketing firm. She'd given up that career for what she'd thought was love and partnership, but what had actually been manipulation and control. "I've been thinking about starting my own consulting firm. Small businesses, nonprofit organizations, companies that need marketing expertise but can't afford the big agencies." "That's perfect," Grace said from the kitchen doorway. "You always did your best work when you felt like you were helping people." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Grace went to answer it and returned with Special Agent Natalie Brooks, who looked remarkably different without her waitress uniform and cover identity. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," Natalie said. "I wanted to see how you and Emma were doing." Claire smiled, gesturing for Natalie to sit down. The relationship between the two women had been complicated from the beginning. Natalie had been the catalyst for Claire's world falling apart, but she'd also been instrumental in bringing Marcus to justice and saving both their lives. "We're doing well, Emma's thriving, and I'm starting to figure out what comes next." Natalie looked at the baby with a mixture of wonder and guilt. "She's beautiful. I'm sorry she had to come into the world under such traumatic circumstances. Natalie, you have nothing to apologize for. You were doing your job, and you probably saved our lives. I spent 8 months lying to you about who I was. I was the reason Marcus left you for someone else, even if that someone else wasn't real." Claire considered this, then shook her head. "Marcus didn't leave me for you, Natalie. He left me for what you represented. Youth, freedom, someone who didn't challenge him or hold him accountable. If it hadn't been you, it would have been someone else. Detective Sullivan had shared some of the surveillance recordings with Claire, evidence of how Marcus had talked about her when he thought no one was listening. The cruelty and contempt in his voice had been devastating, but also clarifying. The man she'd fallen in love with had been a carefully constructed facade, designed to manipulate her into giving up her independence and career. "What happens now?" Claire asked Natalie. "Do you go back to undercover work?" "I'm taking some time off first. 8 months of living a lie takes its toll. After that, probably something in white-collar crime investigation. There are a lot more Marcus Hartwells out there." Vincent stood up to refill his coffee cup. "Speaking of Marcus, has he said anything about why he did it? I mean, the company was profitable. We didn't need to steal from pension funds." Natalie's expression darkened. According to his statements to the prosecutor, it started small. He borrowed money from one account to cover losses in another, planning to pay it back quickly. But the markets went against him, and instead of taking the loss, he doubled down. Every bad decision required a bigger lie to cover it up, until the whole thing became a massive Ponzi scheme. "Anon?" "Classic narcissistic behavior," Rebecca added. "He couldn't admit to making mistakes, so he kept making bigger ones to avoid facing consequences. And when the consequences finally caught up with him, he decided that murder was easier than accountability," Claire said, her voice hardening. Emma finished nursing and began to fuss slightly. Claire lifted her to her shoulder, patting her back gently until the baby settled with a small burp. "She's got good timing," Grace observed. "Even as a newborn, she knows when the conversation gets too heavy." The group fell into comfortable silence, watching the tiny baby who had been born into chaos but was now surrounded by love and protection. Emma represented hope and new beginnings, proof that even the worst situations could give birth to something beautiful. Dr. Cross arrived for Emma's afternoon checkup, full of praise for the baby's development and Claire's recovery. "She's gaining weight perfectly and her reflexes are strong. I think we can safely say she's thriving despite her dramatic entrance into the world." "What about long-term effects from being premature?" Claire asked. "At 32 weeks, with her current development, I don't anticipate any lasting issues. She may need some extra monitoring during her first year, but she's showing every sign of being a completely healthy baby." As the doctor examined Emma, Natalie pulled Claire aside. "I want you to know that the FBI has offered you protection if you're willing to testify at Marcus's trial. We can relocate you and Emma if you're concerned about your safety." Claire shook her head. "I'm not running anymore. Marcus took 3 years of my life, and he nearly took my daughter's life. I'm going to face him in that courtroom and tell the world exactly what kind of man he really is. It won't be easy. His defense team will try to paint you as a disgruntled ex-wife looking for revenge. Let them try. I've got something now that I didn't have when I was married to Marcus." "What's that?" Claire looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I've got the truth, and I've got nothing left to lose." That evening, after Natalie and the others had left, Claire sat alone with her daughter in the quiet house. Grace had gone to bed early, exhausted by the constant stream of visitors and phone calls that had become their new normal. Claire found herself thinking about the future. Not just Emma's future, but her own. For the first time in years, she was free to make her own choices, to build a life based on her own values rather than someone else's expectations. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news about your husband's arrest. If you need a job when you are ready to return to work, call me. Narawari, David Chen, Henderson and Associates." David Chen had been one of her biggest clients before she'd married Marcus, and Henderson and Associates was the marketing firm where she'd been on the partner track. The fact that they were reaching out to her meant that her professional reputation had survived Marcus's scandal. But as Claire looked at her daughter's sleeping face, she realized she didn't want to go back to her old life. She wanted to build something new, something better, something that would make Emma proud when she was old enough to understand her mother's choices. "Tomorrow we start over, little one," she whispered. "Just you and me and whatever comes next." Outside, a police cruiser made its regular patrol past the house, part of the security measures that would continue until Marcus's trial was over. But inside, Claire felt safer than she had in years. She was no longer living a lie. She was no longer married to a man who saw her as a possession rather than a partner. She was free to become whoever she wanted to be, to build whatever life she could imagine. And with Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms, she could imagine quite a lot. 6 months after Emma's birth, the federal courthouse buzzed with activity as the United States versus Marcus Hartwell trial entered its final week. Claire sat in the witness gallery, Emma sleeping in her car seat beside her, watching as FBI agent Natalie Brooks concluded her testimony about the undercover operation that had brought Marcus's crimes to light. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and personal healing. Claire had started her own marketing consultancy, working with small businesses and nonprofit organizations from her home office while caring for Emma. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways her previous corporate career had never been. "Mrs. Hartwell, please state your name for the record," the prosecutor said as Claire took the witness stand. "Claire Elizabeth Hartwell," she replied, her voice steady despite the weight of Marcus's stare from the defendant's table. "And what was your relationship to the defendant?" "I was married to Marcus Hartwell for 3 years. We divorced following his arrest." Claire had dreaded this moment for months, but now that she was here, facing the man who had betrayed her so completely, she felt nothing but clarity. Marcus looked older than his 42 years, his expensive suits replaced by a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. The arrogant confidence that had once attracted her was gone, replaced by the hunted look of a man who knew his fate was sealed. "Mrs. Hartwell, during your marriage, were you aware of your husband's criminal activities?" "No, I was not. Marcus told me that his wealth came from legitimate business investments and the success of Hartwell Technologies. I had no reason to doubt him." Answering. The prosecutor walked her through the timeline of their relationship, how Marcus had pursued her relentlessly, convinced her to give up her career, isolated her from friends and colleagues who might have asked uncomfortable questions about his sudden wealth. "In your opinion, Mrs. Hartwell, why did the defendant want you to abandon your marketing career?" Claire had thought about this question extensively during her therapy sessions. Dr. Sarah Wellington, the trauma counselor Rebecca had recommended, had helped her understand the psychology of financial abuse and control. "I think Marcus needed me to be completely dependent on him financially and emotionally. My career represented independence and my own source of income. As long as I had that, I couldn't be completely controlled." "And when you became pregnant?" Claire's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, remembering those hopeful early months when she'd believed they were building a family together. "He seemed happy at first, but I noticed he became more distant as my pregnancy progressed. Now I understand that he was already planning his escape and saw the baby as another complication to manage." Marcus's defense attorney objected to several of Claire's answers, trying to paint her as a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge through false testimony. But the evidence against Marcus was overwhelming: bank records, recorded conversations, testimony from dozens of victims whose retirement funds he had stolen. Vincent Morrison testified about discovering the offshore accounts and confronting Marcus about the missing money. The attempted murder charge related to Vincent's car accident added years to Marcus's potential sentence and demonstrated the lengths he was willing to go to protect his secrets. During cross-examination, Marcus's attorney tried to suggest that Vincent had been complicit in the fraud, but Vincent's military record and consistent cooperation with law enforcement made him an unshakable witness. "Mr. Morrison, did you ever knowingly participate in defrauding investors?" "Absolutely not. When I discovered what Marcus was doing, I immediately confronted him and threatened to go to the authorities. That's why he tried to have me killed." The most devastating testimony came from the victims themselves: retired teachers who had lost their pension funds, firefighters whose disability benefits had vanished, small business owners whose 401k accounts had been emptied by Marcus's Ponzi scheme. Margaret Patterson, a 73-year-old former librarian, testified that she had lost her entire life savings, $140,000, to Marcus's investment fraud. "I worked for 40 years, saved every penny I could, and trusted Marcus Hartwell with my retirement money because he promised it would be safe," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Now I'm living in my daughter's basement because I can't afford rent on my Social Security check." There were dozens of similar stories, each one representing a life destroyed by Marcus's greed and narcissism. The prosecution estimated that over 2,000 families had been affected, with total losses exceeding $250 million. The defense's closing argument was weak and desperate, trying to portray Marcus as a businessman who had made mistakes rather than a calculating criminal who had committed fraud and attempted murder. But the evidence was too strong, and the jury's faces showed they weren't buying the narrative. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, attempted murder, and kidnapping. Marcus showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, staring straight ahead as if he were somewhere else entirely. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Judge Patricia Hendricks imposed the maximum penalty allowed by law: 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, plus full restitution to the victims. "Mr. Hartwell," Judge Hendricks said, her voice carrying the weight of moral authority, "you have shown a complete lack of remorse for crimes that have devastated thousands of innocent people. You stole their life savings, you attempted to murder your business partner, and you tried to kill your pregnant wife to avoid accountability for your actions." Marcus finally showed emotion, his lawyer having to steady him as the full weight of his sentence hit home. "The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. You will also pay full restitution to your victims, though we both know that money can never truly compensate for the harm you have caused." As the bailiffs led Marcus away in shackles, he turned to look at Claire one last time. She met his gaze steadily, holding Emma in her arms, and saw something she had never seen before in his eyes: genuine regret. Not for his crimes, but for what he was losing: his daughter who would grow up without knowing her father, and the life he had thrown away through his own choices. After the sentencing, Claire found herself outside the courthouse with Natalie, both women feeling drained but vindicated by the outcome. "How are you feeling?" Natalie asked. "Relieved," Claire admitted. "It's finally over. Emma and I can move forward without looking over our shoulders." "Kian, what's next for you?" Claire looked at her 8-month-old daughter, who was babbling happily and reaching for the colorful balloons a supporter had brought to celebrate the verdict. "I'm expanding my consulting business. Rebecca's helping me with the legal structure, and Vincent is providing some startup capital. We want to focus on helping small businesses owned by women and minorities, people who might not otherwise have access to professional marketing services." "That sounds perfect for you." "I think so too. For the first time in years, I'm building something that's entirely mine, based on my own values and goals." Detective Sullivan joined them, looking satisfied but tired after months of complex legal proceedings. "Congratulations to both of you," he said. "This was one of the most challenging cases of my career, but also one of the most rewarding. You both showed incredible courage." "What about the money?" Claire asked. "How much will the victims get back?" "The asset recovery team has been working around the clock. We've managed to trace and freeze about $160 million. After legal fees and administrative costs, the victims should receive approximately 70 cents on the dollar. It wasn't perfect. Many of the victims would never fully recover from their losses, but it was better than anyone had expected when the investigation began." A year later, Claire stood in the renovated office space that housed Hartwell Consulting. She had kept Marcus's name because it belonged to Emma too, and she wanted her daughter to know that they could transform something associated with shame into something positive. The business was thriving, with clients ranging from immigrant-owned restaurants to women's shelters to community organizations. Claire had hired 2 part-time employees and was considering expanding to a second location. Emma took her first steps in that office, tottering between Claire's desk and the colorful play area Grace had set up in the corner. At 14 months old, she was a happy, healthy toddler who charmed everyone she met and showed no signs of being affected by the trauma surrounding her birth. "She's going to be a heartbreaker," Rebecca said, watching Emma stack blocks with intense concentration. "She's going to be strong," Claire corrected. "She's going to know that women can build their own lives and don't need to depend on anyone else for their security or happiness." Vincent appeared in the doorway, carrying coffee and the morning newspaper. His recovery from the assassination attempt had been complete, and he had thrown himself into legitimate business ventures with the passion of someone who had been given a second chance at life. Have you seen today's headlines? He asked, unfolding the business section. Former tech CEO Hartwell denied appeal. Read the banner across the top of the page. The article detailed Marcus's failed attempt to overturn his conviction, noting that his appeals had been rejected at every level. Good, Claire said simply. He needs to serve every day of that sentence. Natalie Brooks stopped by the office later that day, looking relaxed and happy in civilian clothes. She had left the FBI 6 months earlier to start her own corporate security firm, specializing in financial fraud prevention. How's retirement from undercover work? Claire asked. Wonderful. I sleep better at night knowing I don't have to pretend to be someone else anymore. And my new job lets me prevent crimes before they happen, rather than cleaning up after the damage is done. Any regrets about the Marcus case? Natalie watched Emma playing with her toys, this healthy, happy child who might not have survived if her father's criminal plans had succeeded. None at all. Sometimes justice takes time, but it's worth fighting for. That evening, Claire sat in her mother's backyard, watching Emma chase soap bubbles while Grace prepared dinner. The house was filled with the sounds of family, laughter, conversation, the comfortable chaos of daily life. Claire's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, her heart skipped, remembering the days when unknown calls meant threats or legal complications. But the message was from Margaret Patterson, the retired librarian who had testified at Marcus's trial. Dear Claire, I wanted you to know that I received my restitution check today. It's not everything I lost, but it's enough to rent my own apartment again. Thank you for having the courage to testify. Your daughter should be proud of her mother. Margaret, Claire smiled, watching Emma toddle across the grass toward her. The little girl had grass stains on her knees and dirt under her fingernails, evidence of a childhood spent exploring the world fearlessly. Emma, Claire called, scooping her daughter into her arms. Someday when you're older, I'm going to tell you a story about how you came into this world during one of the scariest times in Mommy's life, but how you made everything better just by being born. Emma giggled and grabbed a handful of Claire's hair, her dark eyes bright with curiosity about everything around her. And I'm going to tell you about all the people who helped us, Grandma Grace and Aunt Rebecca and Agent Natalie and Uncle Vincent. I'm going to tell you that sometimes when bad things happen, good people step up to help, and that's how we survived. Grace called from the kitchen that dinner was ready, and Claire carried Emma toward the house, toward the warm light and familiar voices and the promise of another day in a life she had built from scratch. As they reached the back door, Claire paused to look at her reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who had sat in Romano's restaurant 18 months ago, watching her marriage collapse in public. This woman was stronger, more confident, more authentically herself. She had survived her husband's betrayal and his attempt to murder her. She had testified against him in federal court and seen justice served. She had built a successful business and raised a healthy, happy daughter as a single mother. Most importantly, she had learned that she didn't need anyone else to validate her worth or define her future. She was enough, exactly as she was. Come on, baby girl, she whispered to Emma. Let's go have dinner with the people who really love us. Behind them, the sun set over the city where Marcus Hartwell sat in a federal prison cell, serving the first year of a 25-year sentence for crimes that had destroyed thousands of lives. He had lost everything: his freedom, his fortune, his family, and his daughter, who would grow up knowing that her father had chosen greed over love. But in the warm kitchen of Grace Matthews' house, surrounded by the people who had helped them survive the worst experience of their lives, Claire Hartwell and her daughter Emma were proof that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best life you never imagined. And as Emma took her first bite of solid food, reaching eagerly for everything within her grasp, Claire knew that her daughter would grow up understanding that strength comes not from what you have, but from what you survive and what you build in the aftermath. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities that Marcus's crimes could never touch. They were free, they were safe, and they were finally truly home. And that's how Claire Hartwell transformed the worst betrayal of her life into the foundation for her strongest, most authentic self. Sometimes the person who breaks you is actually freeing you to become who you were always meant to be. If this story moved you, inspired you, or just completely shocked you like it did me? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a situation where what seemed like the worst thing turned out to be exactly what you needed? Share your story. This community loves supporting each other through life's unexpected plot twists. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Claire's incredible journey, you know what would mean the world to me. Hit that like button to let me know this type of storytelling resonates with you. It genuinely helps me understand what stories you want to hear more of. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because I've got more unbelievable true stories coming your way. Stories of women who faced impossible odds and came out stronger on the other side. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, remember Claire's lesson. You are stronger than your worst day, braver than your biggest fear, and capable of building a life more beautiful than you ever imagined. I'll see you in the next story.